I used to watch a serial on television called Adventure Theater, and they had Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe on it, and I used to love that.
Flash Gordon was a good mix of crazy and wonder. From a movie star who vanishes at Christmas, never to return to his $30 million film, to grown men in bird costumes who can't sit down because their wings hurt too much. This is the bizarre true story of Flash Gordon's chaotic production. But how did Hollywood's most expensive disaster become a beloved cult classic? And what shocking secrets remain hidden today? Up next are the weirdest facts you didn't know about Flash Gordon. Join us. The rejection that changed cinema forever. A young filmmaker walked into Dino De Laurentiis' office with a dream. George Lucas wanted to bring Flash Gordon to the big screen, but the Italian producer had other plans. De Laurentiis looked at this fresh-faced director and said no. That rejection gave rise to cinema's most twisted origin stories. Lucas left empty-handed but determined. He decided to create his space adventure instead. The result? Star Wars, a film that would reshape Hollywood forever. But here's where the story gets bizarre. Star Wars became such a massive hit that De Laurentiis suddenly realized he needed to make his science fiction epic. The same property he'd denied to Lucas was now his golden ticket. The irony deepened when De Laurentiis discovered his perfect director had a secret connection to Flash Gordon. Federico Fellini had once worked on bootleg Flash Gordon comics during Mussolini's ban on American strips in 1930s Italy. When Fellini refused to direct the film, they named Princess Aura's pet after him, a tribute or an insult, depending on your perspective. De Laurentiis assembled a chaotic production that would make film history for all the wrong reasons. Italian crews who couldn't speak English. A translator so terrible she'd describe a beautiful woman as a cat. Actors playing scenes straight while everyone else thought they were making comedy. The cast and crew had no idea they were creating something that would become a cult phenomenon precisely because everything went wrong. But that rejection was just the beginning of an even stranger tale. What happened next would become Hollywood's most obsessive creative meltdown. The director who disappeared after 1 year. Nicholas Roeg locked himself away with stacks of Flash Gordon comics. The acclaimed director of The Man Who Fell to Earth spent an entire year consumed by his vision. He wasn't just reading the strips. He was reimagining everything. Roeg saw Flash Gordon as something nobody expected. Not an action hero, but a metaphysical space messiah. Gone were the classic tower designs from the original comics. In their place, Roeg dreamed of crystalline cities that defied physics. His Mongo would be an interpretive wonderland where reality bent like light through a prism. For 12 months, Roeg crafted detailed storyboards and treatments. He hired artists to bring his cosmic vision to life. Every panel sparkled with otherworldly beauty. This wasn't Flash Gordon. This was something entirely new. Then came the meeting that ended everything. Roeg walked into De Laurentiis' office, confident and excited. He spread out his year of work across the producer's desk. The crystalline cities gleamed. The metaphysical concepts swirled across page after page. De Laurentiis took one long look, then said 5 words that ended it all. He didn't want that picture. Roeg stood, silent, and walked out. No argument. No second chance. A year of bold ideas, sketches, and passion, all gone in minutes. Just like that, the dream fell apart. After crushing one director's dreams, De Laurentiis made an even bolder move. But would the most famous filmmaker in Italy take the bait? The Fellini insult hidden in plain sight. Federico Fellini was De Laurentiis's dream director. The legendary filmmaker behind masterpieces like 8½, seemed perfect for Flash Gordon. After all, Fellini had a secret connection to the character. During Mussolini's ban on American comics in the 1930s, a young Fellini had worked on bootleg Flash Gordon strips in Italy. De Laurentiis made his pitch. Fellini listened politely, then delivered his crushing rejection. The producer's response was pure, petty revenge. He named Princess Aura's pet Fellini in the final film, a backhanded insult disguised as tribute that moviegoers still see today without knowing the story behind it. With 2 directors down, De Laurentiis turned to Mike Hodges, the gritty filmmaker behind Get Carter. Hodges stepped into a production already spinning out of control. Scripts kept changing. Sets appeared overnight. Costumes arrived without explanation. Years later, Hodges would call Flash Gordon the most expensive improvisation in film history. $27 million spent on a movie where nobody knew what they were making from day to day. 3 directors had already left their mark on this one film. Lucas pitched it, but got turned down. Roeg dreamed up a wild, surreal version that never happened. Fellini said no with a smile, and then came Hodges, walking straight into a mess, unaware he'd soon be steering this runaway train. Each rejection and ego clash pushed the project further into chaos and closer to accidental genius. With directors settled, the real chaos was just beginning to unfold. But how could one person's language skills destroy an entire movie? The translator who couldn't translate. Lorenzo Semple Jr. had written for the Batman television series and worked with De Laurentiis before. He seemed like the perfect choice to craft Flash Gordon's screenplay. But there was one massive problem nobody saw coming. De Laurentiis had insisted on translating every script into Italian using his translator. This woman had one small issue. She couldn't translate anything correctly. When Semple wrote about a tall, beautiful woman walking into a room, the translator somehow turned her into a beautiful cat. Semple watched in horror as his carefully crafted scenes became complete nonsense. He complained to De Laurentiis about the terrible translations, expecting the producer to fix the problem immediately. Instead, De Laurentiis delivered one of the strangest responses in Hollywood history. He didn't want to be fooled by written words. He preferred not understanding the actual dialogue because he only cared about the story's basic shape. This strange, creative mindset caused chaos from the top down. The cast kept getting mixed signals. One moment they were told to play it straight. The next they were encouraged to be silly. Scenes didn't match in tone, mood, or purpose. The crew was constantly confused. Some thought it was a bold sci-fi epic. Others thought it was a full-blown spoof. Nobody was ever really sure what they were making. Meanwhile, De Laurentiis kept pressuring Semple to make Flash Gordon funnier, like his Batman work. Semple later admitted this was a catastrophic mistake that sent the whole project spinning even further out of control. But translation chaos was nothing compared to what happened next. How could a game show contestant who lost his date become Hollywood's newest action hero? The dating game discovery that changed everything. Sam Jones walked onto the dating game stage just trying to make some quick cash. He had no acting experience beyond a tiny role in the movie 10. His main credential was a spread in Playgirl magazine. Jones answered the questions, charmed nobody, and lost the date completely. What he didn't know was that someone from the De Laurentiis family was watching at home. The phone rang the next morning. Suddenly, Jones found himself sitting across from Dino De Laurentiis, who saw exactly what he wanted: a buff, blonde American boy who looked the part. Acting ability barely mattered. Jones wasn't the first choice. Kurt Russell had turned down the role because Flash Gordon seemed too one-dimensional. Arnold Schwarzenegger got rejected because his thick accent made him impossible to understand. The casting process had become a disaster of its own. But Jones faced his problems during the screen tests. The production team wanted him to wear blue contact lenses to match the comic book character. Jones struggled through his lines, squinting and stumbling over words. Finally, he asked to remove the contacts because he couldn't read the script. That moment revealed something nobody expected. Without the lenses, Jones could deliver his lines. The discovery saved his audition and landed him the role that would define his brief Hollywood career. Sometimes the biggest breaks come from the smallest mistakes. Jones may have stumbled into his role, but his co-star tried everything to escape hers. What desperate move did Melody Anderson make when she realized what she'd gotten into? The kidnapped co-star's desperate escape attempt. Anderson had her life perfectly planned. She was leaving New York for Los Angeles to star in a television series. Her career path seemed clear and promising. Then Dino De Laurentiis made her an offer that wasn't an offer at all. Anderson told the producer she couldn't do Flash Gordon. She had other commitments. She needed to get to California. De Laurentiis listened to her protests and delivered his response with typical bluntness. She was going to do Flash Gordon, whether she liked it or not. That same night, Anderson found herself on a plane to London. She later described the experience as being kidnapped. One moment, she was planning her television career. The next, she was trapped in a science fiction epic she never wanted to make. The cast that assembled in London brought wildly different attitudes to the chaotic production. Max von Sydow showed up genuinely excited to play Ming the Merciless. As a kid, he'd devoured Flash Gordon comics, dreaming of distant planets and wild adventures. So stepping into that world felt personal. He wasn't just collecting a paycheck. He was living out a childhood fantasy, finally stepping into the pages that once sparked his imagination. Timothy Dalton brought a grounded, no-nonsense attitude to the chaos around him. For the future James Bond, Flash Gordon wasn't a passion project. It was just work. He arrived on set, delivered his lines, and moved on. No fuss, no flair, just a paycheck. And that's exactly how he treated it. These clashing personalities created an emotional powder keg that would explode across every scene. These clashing personalities were nothing compared to the man designing their world. But what happens when an Oscar winner loses his mind over comic book panels? The crazed Italian's impossible designs. Danilo Donati had already won Academy Awards for his brilliant costume and production design work. He was a respected artist with decades of experience creating movie magic. Then Flash Gordon arrived and turned him into something entirely different. Donati became obsessed with translating comic book panels directly into reality. He studied every line and color from the original strips with the intensity of a scholar. His vision was breathtaking and completely impractical. Lorenzo Semple Jr. would later describe Donati as a crazed Italian who designed the entire movie around costumes instead of story. Sets existed to show off elaborate outfits. Scenes were written to display stunning visual pieces. The tail began wagging the dog in the most expensive way possible. Donati's creations looked incredible on screen. His costumes sparkled with otherworldly beauty. His sets gleamed like jeweled palaces from another dimension. Every frame burst with visual splendor that still takes your breath away decades later. But his artistic obsession created massive problems during filming. Actors couldn't move properly in the elaborate costumes. The sets looked gorgeous, but made no practical sense for action scenes. The Hawkmen couldn't even sit down because their wings would stab into their backs. Donati had created a visual masterpiece that was almost impossible to film. His mad genius pushed the production further into beautiful chaos. The costume torture chamber. But the crazed Italians' impossible designs were just the beginning of a nightmare that would torture the cast. The beautiful costumes that made Flash Gordon so visually stunning came with a horrifying price. The actors weren't just wearing elaborate outfits. They were trapped inside instruments of medieval torture. The Hawkmen had it the worst of all. These winged warriors looked magnificent on screen, but between takes, they couldn't sit down. The massive wings would dig straight into their backs, causing real pain. During breaks, crew members would find dozens of grown men lying face down on the studio floor like wounded birds, unable to move without agony. Melody Anderson discovered her own personal hell during the spider transformation scene. The makeup team spent 6 grueling hours painting her entire body green and strapping a 25-pound headpiece to her skull. Glass eyeballs rolled around inside the contraption, while fake blood dripped from vampire fangs. After 10 hours of this torture, the director walked in with devastating news. The entire elaborate setup had nothing to do with the script. Meanwhile, the tilting disc fight scenes became paint disasters. The silver spray paint covering the props would coat the actors' bodies between every take. Production ground to a halt as crew members frantically scrubbed metallic paint off Timothy Dalton and Sam Jones over and over again. The costumes looked incredible in the final film, but behind the cameras, they created a bizarre torture chamber where actors suffered for their art in ways no one had anticipated. Costume torture was nothing compared to what happened next. What happens when the movie's biggest star simply vanishes one Christmas morning? The star who vanished. Sam Jones wasn't just fighting with painful costumes during Flash Gordon's production. He was fighting with everyone. The handsome quarterback-turned-actor had developed a dangerous pattern of getting into actual physical fights on set, turning the already chaotic production into a war zone. In one of the most bizarre moments in movie history, De Laurentiis made a shocking decision. Instead of shutting down the $30 million production, he told director Mike Hodges to keep filming with stand-ins and voice doubles. Flash Gordon became the first major Hollywood blockbuster ever completed after its star went missing, creating a cinematic mystery that still baffles people today. But Sam's disappearance wasn't the only mystery that haunted Flash Gordon's production. Who was the secret voice that replaced him? The voice actor, whose identity remains secret. When you hear Flash Gordon's most famous lines, you might not be hearing Sam Jones at all. After the star vanished during Christmas break, director Mike Hodges faced a nightmare. He had a $30 million movie with missing dialogue and no leading man to record it. So Hodges did something unprecedented. He hired a mystery voice actor to dub over Jones's lines in post-production. But here's where it gets weird. Nobody knows who this phantom voice belongs to. Hodges claimed it was just a few lines here and there. Jones fired back, insisting it was a majority of his dialogue. The truth? Somewhere in between lies one of Hollywood's strangest cover-ups. Watching Flash Gordon, hearing that iconic voice declare, "I'm flying blind on a rocket cycle." But whose voice is it? The dubbed lines were so seamless that even today, film experts can't agree which scenes feature the real Sam Jones versus his mysterious sound alike. The Italian crew couldn't speak English well enough to keep proper records. But the voice mystery was just the beginning of Flash Gordon's audio adventures. Wait until you see what happened when the cameras started rolling again. Special effects disasters and sound effect chaos. Flash. Gordon was one of the first movies to use blue screen technology on a massive scale. Sounds impressive, right? It was a complete disaster. Picture this. Melody Anderson hanging in the air, crash mats, staring at black walls covered in lights, and hanging cords. The director yells, "Look up and see the Sky Palace!" But all she sees is darkness and confusion. No models, no reference points, just empty space and her imagination. The Hawkmen had it even worse. These poor actors couldn't sit down between takes because their wing costumes would stab into their backs. During breaks, you'd find them lying face down on the floor, like they were ready for takeoff. It looked ridiculous, but it was their only relief. Then there's Brian Blessed, who played the king of the Hawkmen. This guy was so into his role that he started making his sound effects. While firing his cardboard bazooka, he'd go pew, pew, pew right into the microphone. Every technical failure made simple scenes take forever. But somehow, all this chaos created something magical. Every technical failure made simple scenes take forever. But what happened next shocked everyone. Why was the crew laughing? The accidental comedy that horrified its creator. Here's the wildest part. Nobody was trying to make Flash Gordon funny. The director gave strict orders to play everything completely seriously. No jokes, no winking at the camera, just pure space adventure drama. But something magical happened when they watched the daily footage. The crew would gather around the screen and burst into laughter. Not polite chuckles, hysterical, can't-breathe laughter. The more seriously the actors played their roles, the funnier it became. Dino De Laurentiis was horrified. He wanted his epic space opera, not a comedy. Sam Jones was standing around between takes, bored out of his mind. He grabbed one of the prop eggs and said it looked like a football. Melody Anderson joked that if he were a quarterback, she should be a cheerleader. They improvised the whole ridiculous sequence on the spot. Nobody planned it. Nobody wrote it. Two actors just started goofing around because they had nothing else to do. The cast kept playing it straight, while audiences couldn't stop laughing. They created comedy gold without even knowing it. But the biggest shock was still coming. Who are the Queens? Director Mike Hodges had a vision for Flash Gordon's soundtrack. He wanted Pink Floyd to create something dark and atmospheric. But like everything else in this production, nothing went according to plan. Queen's manager somehow got wind of the project and arranged a meeting with Dino De Laurentiis. When he pitched the legendary rock band, the producer's response was priceless. He had no clue who they were. De Laurentiis had never listened to rock music in his entire life. Queen would be his first exposure to the genre. The man who greenlit a $30 million space epic had no idea he was about to work with one of the biggest bands on the planet. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of background music, Queen demanded something nobody had ever done before. They wanted full creative control to make a real rock soundtrack that would sync perfectly with the movie's most dramatic moments. They watched 20 minutes of footage and fell in love with the over-the-top spectacle. Brian May and Roger Taylor saw the sci-fi chaos and knew they could create something special. They convinced De Laurentiis to let them experiment. The result? Pure magic. Queen didn't just write songs. They crafted an audio experience that turned every scene into an epic moment. The pounding drums, the soaring vocals, and the perfect timing with the action on screen. This accidental collaboration between clueless producers and rock legends created one of the most unforgettable soundtracks in movie history. Flash Gordon's music became bigger than the movie itself. Nothing could have saved this production from this next catastrophe. The lawsuit that killed the sequels. Forever. After Flash Gordon flopped at the box office, you'd think the story was over. But Sam Jones had other plans. He wasn't done fighting with Dino De Laurentiis. Jones marched into court with a shocking demand. His original contract promised him 2 more Flash Gordon movies. He wanted De Laurentiis to honor that deal, even though the first film was a disaster. The lawsuit was bold, desperate, and doomed from the start. De Laurentiis had already moved on. The Italian producer watched his space epic bomb in America and lose millions of dollars. The last thing he wanted was to make more Flash Gordon movies with the actor who had caused him so much trouble. The court battle dragged on for months. Jones fought hard, convinced he deserved his sequels. He probably dreamed of redemption, of proving himself as Flash Gordon in better movies with bigger budgets. But dreams don't always win in court. Jones lost the lawsuit completely. No sequels, no second chances, no Flash Gordon future. The legal defeat crushed any hope of continuing the story. What happened to Sam Jones after that? He made one of the strangest career moves in Hollywood history. The former Flash Gordon became a private bodyguard and moved to Mexico. From space hero to personal protection in a foreign country. Those planned sequels, they would have taken Flash to different planets, faced new villains, and maybe even fixed the problems that made the first movie so chaotic. Instead, they became Hollywood legends that never existed. The lawsuit didn't just end Sam Jones's career, it buried Flash Gordon forever. Or so everyone thought. Secret connections spanning decades. Flash Gordon's influence reached places nobody expected. Hidden connections began to appear in the most unexpected places, revealing that this chaotic movie had left deeper marks than anyone realized. Here's something that will blow your mind. One actor appeared in both Star Wars and Flash Gordon. William Hootkins played the doomed pilot Porkins in Star Wars, then showed up as Dr. Zarkov's assistant in Flash Gordon. The same guy who got blown up in the Death Star battle also helped save Earth from Ming the Merciless. But the weirdest connection involves Queen themselves. After creating Flash Gordon's legendary soundtrack, they only scored one other movie in their entire career, Highlander. That film contained a direct reference to Flash Gordon when they wrote the song Who Wants to Live Forever, stolen straight from Prince Voltan's line in Flash Gordon. Years later, director Edgar Wright became obsessed with Flash Gordon's visual style. He used it as inspiration for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, copying the crazy colors, comic book panels, and over-the-top fight scenes. Wright called Flash Gordon an absolute blast that deserved more respect than its campy reputation suggested. The influence kept spreading. Legendary comic artist Alex Ross, decades after the movie flopped, designed an entire line of Flash Gordon action figures. This wasn't nostalgia. It was genuine artistic admiration for the film's bold visual choices. Even the Beastie Boys referenced Flash Gordon's Italian cousin, Danger Diabolic, in their music videos. These connections weren't accidents. Creative people kept discovering something special hidden inside this messy production. Flash Gordon had become a secret language among artists, directors, and musicians. They saw what audiences missed in 1980. Pure creative courage wrapped in beautiful chaos. But there was one final twist nobody saw coming. Flash Gordon had become a secret language among artists. How does a disaster become immortal? The flop that became a phenomenon. Flash Gordon hit theaters in 1980 and immediately faced its biggest enemy, Star Wars. The space epic that George Lucas created because he couldn't get Flash Gordon rights was now crushing the original in American theaters. Audiences expected something like Star Wars, realistic space battles, serious heroes, believable worlds. Instead, they got camp, cheese, and characters who delivered every line like they were reading grocery lists. American moviegoers didn't know what to make of it. The box office numbers were brutal. Flash Gordon bombed so hard that theaters started pulling it after just a few weeks. Critics tore it apart. Trade magazines called it one of the year's biggest disasters. Dino De Laurentiis watched millions of dollars disappear. But something strange was happening across the ocean. European audiences loved Flash Gordon. They understood the comic book style, embraced the over-the-top acting, and went wild for Queen's thunderous soundtrack. The same movie that failed in America became a hit in Europe. Lorenzo Semple Jr., the screenwriter, felt sick watching his work get destroyed by critics. He later admitted the whole approach was wrong, the constant changes between serious and silly, the confusion about tone, the pressure to be funny when Flash Gordon was never meant to be a comedy. He called it all a terrible mistake. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Flash Gordon's failure in mainstream theaters gave it something more valuable than box office success: freedom to become something else entirely. Without the pressure of being a hit, Flash Gordon found its real audience through home video, late-night TV, and word of mouth. People discovered they could love it for all the reasons critics hated it. The stilted dialogue became quotable. The ridiculous costumes became iconic. The cheese became charming. Fans weren't looking for another polished space saga. They embraced Flash Gordon for exactly what it was: loud, weird, chaotic, and completely sincere. Its over-the-top style, clunky effects, and wild energy became part of the charm. What others called flaws, fans saw as personality. Every misstep turned into unforgettable magic. The production that nearly destroyed careers became a cult phenomenon that outlasted most of its contemporary blockbusters. Flash Gordon proved that sometimes the biggest disasters create the most lasting magic. And that's the real secret of Flash Gordon. It never tried to be a cult classic. It just was. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.